This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they come in. First, though, our top stories this evening. PC Andrew Harper's widow has told Sky News that people who kill emergency service workers should be jailed for life. The Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, has said that he won't resign after the government's U-turn on A-level grades. And the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has scrapped Public Health England, the agency responsible for responding to national health emergencies. Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour or so, then, we will see what's making the headlines with The Observer's chief leader writer, Sonia Sodha, and the columnist for the article, Ali Miraj. Welcome. Great to see both of you. Hello to you. As ever, though, let us start with the front pages, as many papers did last night. The Metro rounding on the Education Secretary over the exams fiasco with its headline, "You're Gavin a laugh." On that same story, then, the Yorkshire Evening Post quotes students at Leeds University saying this has been a total shambles. Daily Mail pictures Gavin Williamson with the headline, "The man who won't take the blame." The Eye leads on the Prime Minister backing Mr Williamson as the blame game begins. Daily Star pictures Boris Johnson in a missing poster, claiming he hasn't been seen since the exams chaos began. The Daily Telegraph says universities are demanding more money from the government in order to enrol more students. Bloodbath is the headline in the Daily Express as experts warn 300,000 retail jobs could be lost. And the Financial Times leads on US stocks being at an all-time high despite the pandemic. So let's get the thoughts then of Sonia Sodha and Ali Miraj. Welcome again to both of you. If last night's headlines were bad, they won't want to see this lot, will they, the government? Daily Mail, the man who won't take the blame. Sonia?
Yeah, it's a second day of a really bad set of front pages for the government. And, you know, what's quite extraordinary, I think, is that everyone knew this was coming down the tracks, this sort of whole A-level fiasco. And the government's handling of it has just been absolutely awful. So these set of front pages were kind of really entirely predictable. All of the focus tonight is really on whether Gavin Williamson will keep his job. Certainly the noises that are coming out of Number 10 elsewhere very much suggest that he's not going to go. That's not a big surprise, actually. We know Boris Johnson, you know, the way that he sort of protected his own aide, Dominic Cummings, when he broke the spirit of lockdown regulations. We know that Boris Johnson places a great emphasis on those who are loyal to him, keeping them close. We also know that Gavin Williamson used to be chief whip at the Conservative Party, so he knows a lot of the secrets. So that inspires some form of loyalty, I suppose. So I always thought he was probably going to stay. But it is just incredible when you look at the extent, you know, this huge turn that the government have had to pull, this entirely sort of predictable outcome. And you've got absolutely no one at the top taking responsibility for it. You've got the government trying to shove the blame onto Ofqual. You've got Gavin Williamson saying, well, I didn't even know about this until the weekend before, which is an absolutely ludicrous suggestion. Suggests he's either incompetent or he's not telling us the truth. So really, I mean, it's 20 years ago, there is absolutely no doubt if this had happened, the minister would have gone.
Yes, and he's lost a post before, hasn't he, Gavin Williamson? I don't know about you, Ali, this feels quite personal, doesn't it? As if the newspapers simply don't like him. Thanks to his bungling, the Mail says 57,000 A-level pupils are heartbroken, but as he shamelessly tries to pass the buck, Gavin Williamson is the man who won't take the blame. Well, the Metro, you're Gavin a laugh. Education Secretary clings on to his job despite great exams fiasco. They seem to have it in for him specifically, don't they?
Well, they do, Anna, and rightly so. I mean, we are in a situation here where Gavin Williamson, as you rightly say, was sacked by Theresa May when she was Prime Minister and he was Defence Secretary for bungling. He basically allegedly leaked something from a National Security Council meeting, so he was turfed out. And now we have a situation here where this could have been seen coming down the track, this problem. We already had the Scottish Hires issue a week or so ago, and he'd already been given a report by the Education Select Committee Chairman Robert Halfon entitled getting the grades they have earned, really warning about the fact that there was an issue potentially with grades not being awarded properly, people with sharp elbows and the well-heeled, as Robert Halfon puts it, appealing properly and doing better than others. And we're now in this situation. And Anna, it really strikes me. I mean, Sonia mentions that 20 years ago, the minister would have resigned. It sort of reminds me of Lord Carrington in 1982. You know, he was foreign secretary, resigned straight away as soon as the Argentinians invaded the Falkland Islands. He was not even, hadn't even done anything wrong, but he felt it was the honorable thing to do. He'd served in the Second World War, and there was honor in politics. Now, it feels we're being run by rampant careerists where loyalty trumps competence.
Or not run, if you look at the Daily Star. Missing. Have you seen him? We can guess who it is. It's Boris Johnson. I don't know how you both feel about politicians having a holiday. It's been a really bad run. He has nearly died of coronavirus. He has got a baby. Should he be described as the invisible man at this stage in the summer holidays?
Well, there is a sort of saying in Westminster that when the Daily Star leads on politics, you know you're in trouble as a government. And of course, we're all sympathetic to politicians needing to take a break and go on holiday. And, you know, as you say, Boris Johnson's had a difficult few months and he's had a new son. But this was such a big crisis for the government. And if you think of any other prime minister, it's really in the last sort of 20 to 30 years, it's very hard to envisage them not breaking off their holiday when the government's in crisis, at least to sort of intervene, to perhaps give a message to the country's young people, at least to sort of intervene behind the scenes and sort stuff out. But, you know, which apparently Boris Johnson may have been doing a little bit of, but he hasn't been out in public. You know, we've been hearing heartbreaking stories of young people who've been downgraded several grades, lost out on university places. Feels like an absolutely massive injustice. These are young people who've already been hard done by, not been at school for 3 months, they couldn't take their exams. And you sort of think that might be the moment where the Prime Minister might break off his holiday and come out.
Let's be realistic. You know, we've been in crises or turbulence since he took over. This is really no different from, you know.
This is a crisis. Yeah. No, I understand that, but this was absolutely a crisis of the government's own making. It was always going to be hard to sort out A-levels, but there were lots of people warning in advance saying you've got to get the system right, you've got to have time for appeals, you can't just give young people grades willy-nilly, publish them and leave so little time for universities to sort this out. They were warned about this. This is a crisis of the government's own making, and you would absolutely expect the Prime Minister to break off a holiday for this.
Yeah, Ali, I have to say the Daily Star is quite funny. Last spotted, well, it's really quite hard to say exactly, but we're pretty sure it was just before the doo-doo hit the fan over the exams fiasco, they're saying. So, I mean, they're having some fun with it in a Daily Star kind of way. But will that point resonate, do you think, in Westminster and beyond?
I think it will. I mean, the Prime Minister has been conspicuous by his absence on this, and he's obviously leaving it to his minister, but his minister is appearing completely hapless and is now looking at throwing people under the bus. He's looking at throwing the chief exec and the chairman of Ofqual under the bus. I mean, there's been briefing now to the papers that the chief exec is a career civil servant who's got a background in procurement, no background in education at all. Same with the chairman, who's an ex-FT journalist. Again, no background in education. And now they're also potentially gunning for the head of the permanent secretary at the education department, apparently because Dominic Cummings and Michael Gove already don't like him, and they're looking for a scapegoat. Now, there used to be a time, Anna, when ministers would carry the can for things that went wrong on their watch. They take the credit for things that go well, and they carry the can when things go badly. Over here, they're looking to throw people under the bus. The same thing's happened with Mark Sedwell, the cabinet secretary, who's been turfed out. Philip Rutnam, the permanent secretary of the Home Office, is in an employment tribunal rather, with his former boss, Priti Patel, having accused her of creating a culture of fear. This is becoming a bit of a trend now. And there used to be a time when we never even heard the names of civil servants or members of Quangos. And now this is sort of a regular occurrence. So I don't think that this gives a particularly good impression of the government, running things well. The only saving grace that they have is that the Labour Party is even more hapless and is even more in an internecine civil war, and therefore the government's getting away with this. But there are several Tory MPs on the backbenches who I've spoken to who are absolutely outraged with this. So we had George Freeman coming out very clearly saying it's a shambles. Robert Halfon, the chair of the Education Select Committee, again saying that these warnings were put out, that Ofqual is not fit for purpose. But at the end of the day, you can't rely as a minister on an algorithm. You are there to make judgments. It's a bit like saying we rely on the science without actually employing our faculties and our brains to come up with our own conclusions. Someone somewhere should have looked at this algorithm and said it's spewing out results that are going to be unjust and unfair to certain pupils. And if there happens to be a little bit of grade inflation this year, that's something that we're going to have to live with because of the situation, which is unprecedented.
I mean, the maths is simple, I suppose. If you've got nearly 40% of students downgraded, you know there's going to be a fair few unhappy people. To the Daily Telegraph now, a couple of interesting stories. You've picked out the universities demand extra cash to teach more students, which was always going to happen. But just quickly, my eye is caught by the story underneath the picture. Boris Johnson is resisting calls for an autumn reshuffle, despite a mounting Tory backlash that a series of coronavirus-related mishaps have left the government being laughed at. Well, add to that the A-level mishap. Sonia, do you think we might see an autumn reshuffle?
Well, it's certainly something that Number 10 want to resist by all accounts. So they want to put off a big reshuffle until after Brexit, until Boris Johnson has sort of secured his legacy, something that the government sees as positive has happened. But what the story refers to, and that there were these sort of noises happening all the time, is that, Tory backbenchers are really unhappy with this. They see a government that has bungled certain aspects of the pandemic and the handling of the pandemic. Some of them were very unhappy with Dominic Cummings and the way that Boris Johnson handled that whole affair with him breaching lockdown guidelines. And now here's yet another, what they see as an unforced error. It's something that, was avertible. It was always going to be difficult, but the government has made it so much worse than it needed to be. So this is why you've got Conservative MPs speaking quite openly to sort of journalists. And you mustn't forget that the Conservatives have got a majority of 80. Boris Johnson won his big majority last December. But what that big majority also does is it means that rumblings, these sorts of, you don't have a tight majority. People on the backbenches feel freer to speak out when they feel that things are going really wrong, like they do now.
Yes, we're running out of time, so I'm just going to reiterate the Daily Telegraph's main story. Universities suggesting they need more money, financial support so they can scale up places this year and next. The elephant in the room, they say, is COVID. Universities can try to expand their places, but they're limited by things like desk space and lab space. I mean, it's a very difficult situation all round, isn't it? More from you in just a moment. We've got plenty more to come, including what's waiting in the in tray of the woman tasked now with revamping the government's public health efforts. We will examine that after the break. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me, Sonia Sodha and Ali Miraj. Welcome back to both of you. We've talked about Ofqual in terms of A-levels. Let's talk now about Public Health England, shall we, in terms of COVID-19. It's a goner. And, Ali, the government certainly likes Dido Harding, don't they?
Well, they do. And then this is all about the fact that Public Health England is being disbanded and a new institute is being set up by Matt Hancock. He announced it at Policy Exchange think tank this morning. And Dido Harding is a favourite, certainly, and it's again smacks of chumocracy. Dido Harding, who's currently the head of Test and Trace, is the daughter of a hereditary peer. She's the wife of a Tory MP. She is a mate of David Cameron's from Oxford and was put into the House of Lords by him. She was ex-head of Talk Talk, and when she was at Talk Talk, presided over a massive data breach of thousands of customers, lost the company 60 million on that data breach. And when she announced the fact that she was leaving the company in 2017, the share price rallied by 7% in a day. And now she's taking over this new task. She's got no experience at all in public health matters. So one's scratching one's head thinking, well, how does this actually happen? And it just smacks again of a fact that if you're well connected, competence just doesn't really come into the equation. The whole purpose behind this new body that's being set up is to try and sort out certain failures that Public Health England made. I mean, they got the figures wrong in terms of recording the number of deaths because they were recording people that had died of other causes other than COVID. Also, the fact that the testing early on in the system in March was abandoned. I mean, to be fair to Public Health England, they just weren't set up for this kind of pandemic. And it almost seems a little bit like we're rearranging the deck chairs at the moment when we're heading towards the iceberg. So I'm not exactly sure that it's the most wise move right now to be doing this. There's a time and place for this. I'm not sure that now's it.
Yes, the missing month of February and early March when planning could have been put in place, possibly. But to be fair to Dido Harding, Baroness Harding, Sonia, when she appeared before the late, great coronavirus news conferences, she was pretty on it, wasn't she?
Yeah, but it's not just about presentation, is it? It's all about the delivery, and there have been real problems with track and trace so far. It wasn't up and running fully over the summer like the government wanted and needed it to be. There have been these delays. There have been issues with contracting out vast chunks of the contact tracing and people not receiving enough training. So I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, the government's looking to blame Public Health England. Well, it itself spent 10 years cutting the budget of Public Health England, really cutting it back, which really affected its capacity to deal with the pandemic. So that doesn't wash. And then the second thing is, I think even if Dido Harding was the best leader in the world, she's already running track and trace. I mean, that is one of the most ambitious government projects, bit of infrastructure to get up and running that we've seen in recent decades. She shouldn't be being made interim head of the replacement agency for Public Health England as well. It's just too much for one person, even if there weren't concerns about her capacity to deliver. So it really just, I agree with Ali, it's government rearranging the deck chairs. It's nuts to close down Public Health England, close down an agency in the middle of a global pandemic. I mean, it just shows how desperate the government is to try and blame other people for its own failings.
Too many meaty issues to discuss our final paper. Perhaps we'll do that at 11:30. It's the Daily Express. Bloodbath, they say. 300,000 jobs facing the axe on the high street. This follows those big numbers from Marks and Spencer's. Big issues for everybody who likes to go shopping and likes the high streets. We'll see you later. Thank you both very much indeed.